I told him to put
Thanks for being here post-lunch. I guess if I see some snoring in the back, I'll just point at you and wake you up. The discussion today is global investment trends. We have a we're lucky to have a panel which brings a perspective from very different markets and many different areas as well. So I won't take too much time. We have a very short time period. We've also gotten a little crunch because of the last session running over time. We'll try and go to 3:15. What I'd like to do is spend the first 20 minutes where we have the panelists talk about what they're doing and what they are seeing in the market in which they are participating and what the implications are for the Indian market, and then open the floor for some Q&A. I'll keep the last 10 minutes for that. So I'll just quick thing about me. I'm Sandeep Singhal. I run a fund called Nexus Venture Partners based here in India doing early stage investing. We do a lot of product companies, and we've been reasonably active over the last 7 years. With that, I'd like to request all the panelists to just introduce themselves and maybe talk a little about what you are doing in the markets that you are present in. Marcel?
Hi, everybody. My name is Marcel, originally from Brazil, but as you can see, not spent a lot of time there. Live in Zurich. I'm a partner with Deloitte in the audit and advisory business. My clients are mostly private equity funds, other alternative investments in pretty much globally, lots of investments in Europe, and have a special sort of set of portfolio companies that I serve that is mainly located in Eastern Europe.
Dmitry.
Hi everybody, my name is Dmitry. I'm a serial entrepreneur, investor, and ecosystems engineer. I spent most of my time between Russia and the US. So I'm currently raising a fund, doing a fund in big data in the US. And most recently, I have been advising an organization called the Russian Venture Company, which is a Russian government-owned fund of funds. So we invest in VC funds in Russia. And it's also an economic development institution. We help develop innovation policy for Russia and build out the ecosystem. So we've been doing that for the past 3 or 4 years. So I guess I can talk a little bit about that, how there's
John, I think your mic should work.
Oh, my mic is on, so I don't have to take double. You'll hear an echo. So my name is John. I'm American, based in Zurich, Switzerland. I've been living in Switzerland and Europe for the past 35 years. I have 2 businesses, Rock Lake Associates, based in Switzerland, which advises and raises capital for private equity and venture capital projects, including, more broadly, alternative assets. So including real estate, and we have 12 partners around the world, 2 in Hong Kong, 2 in New York, 3 in Europe, 1 in Abu Dhabi, 1 in Mumbai. And we typically would work with a client that's got doing like a $500 million to $1 billion fund and advise them on structuring it and then placing it. That's what we do at Rock Lake. And then I'm also a founder and partner of Chiron, which is a global accelerator based here in Bangalore. Chiron is a startup itself. It's many of you probably know it. We founded it together with our partner Lalit Ahuja, who's here today speaking on another panel right at this moment. It's an accelerator. We have a facility in Indira where we bring in next generation technology companies and accelerate them for a 4-month period. We have just put in place a new program which we call 646, which is 6 months in a facility that we have in the Yahoo offices to have a close look-see, about 25 teams. And then those that we think have potential, we bring them into the facility in Indira for 4 months and work with them to develop them. And then afterwards, they go back, if necessary, to the Yahoo second facility for, let's say, maturation. On the Rock Lake side, some things that are maybe relevant, interesting here, we're working with the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C., which is a multilateral investment group, a bank investing in Latin America. They're doing a $500 million fund of funds to invest in early-stage technology companies in Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, and Chile. And we just spent 2 weeks with them in New York, going through their portfolio and all their people. And we had demo days sort of with the portfolio companies. And I have to say it was pretty amazing to see the technology. I would not have expected that to come out of Latin America, but every region of the world is really hot on this entrepreneurship trail. So look forward to talking more about that.
My name is Claude. I had a very atypical career from civil servant to entrepreneur. I started in the Foreign Service of Switzerland as a diplomat, worked in several countries, then joined the private sector, but in the corporate. So I was for many years by Nestlé, then Philip Morris, the tobacco company. Then I joined the logistics groups. I worked for the big ones, the DHL and others. I ended up with a corporate position where I was chairman of the Swiss Post. The two last positions I had was $8 billion and 40,000 employees. And now I choose to become an entrepreneur. So I used to have a lot of people working for me, and I was giving instructions. Now when I give instructions, I just do it by myself, which is nice. I used to travel first class and private jet, and now I go in economy. But it's a very good lesson of modesty, and it's absolutely thrilling. Currently, I have created a platform called Symbioswiss, and I tackle the whole range of entrepreneurship from the lowest level to a bit higher. So I have my own startups where I'm at the lowest level, and I ask some people to coach me. Equally, I created a club of gray hair, white hair, no hair. It's basically former CEOs who all were very successful in their life, but who don't want to stay in the garden or play golf. They have enough money, but they need the challenge. So we are all working on startups. But equally, we are now involved in a number of VC clubs and business angel clubs, helping and screening the projects. I'm also, when we go for how to help entrepreneurs, I'm also a member, together with Marcel and you, of Chiron. We love Chiron. We love the way how you do it here in Begle. I'm the chairman of one of the largest entrepreneurship networks, helping young entrepreneurs back in Europe, Switzerland. And even I joined the politics in order to create the global frameworks which are favorable for entrepreneurship. So I really see it from being helped by coaches to fixing the policies for entrepreneurship. And it's fascinating to see how the world is moving in that direction. When I was young, in that part of the world, it was not fashionable to be an entrepreneur. If you were an entrepreneur, it's that you were not good. And today, you move towards that direction in one generation, and that's fabulous.
I think, Claude, just to take from there and say, what are the areas that you're seeing these entrepreneurs emerge in Europe? What are the markets that they're targeting? Is it more the European market? Are they going global? Is it technology? You know, I know you've also been associated with Clean Global Initiative and Clean Tech. So,
well, actually, you have, in my view, 4 business models. You have the Indian model, where you have a lot of inventors, but relatively few institutions in order to channel it. On the other side, you have countries like Switzerland, where you have more institutions than inventors, or especially than entrepreneurs. The ultimate model is, of course, the US, where you create clusters of universities, plus researchers, plus entrepreneurs. They are not the same, plus the VC. So that's where, because I think in the innovation you have either the multinationals, they are not having a culture which is very innovative oriented, but they have the resources to go through an invention, and you have the spin-offs of universities. So I think the US model a little bit helped with the Israeli model is coming. And then you have the ones creating those clusters. I'm, for example, extremely impressed by Singapore. 10 years ago, they had nothing in biotechnology. They put $1 billion in creating a group of people who are now quite capable in that sector. So I think geographically, it can be the people out of India who work for the Indian market and they look at the American market, and I think it's a normal trend. You are like, for us, I like to be here because I see those talents and those genius which will be the future leaders of the Silicon Valley, but it's better to see them here before they are noticed by all the radars. Yeah. But please do not focus only on the US. What I see in the Silicon Valley or in Boston, and by the way, New York is now catching up in terms of VC as much as the two others, they tell them, go abroad. They tell them, we give you more money, but you have to go to China. You have to be, in 3 years, you have to be in 20 countries. So do not focus only on one market. I think what is important, develop something here, go to the US, but already have a global approach. Most of your products are scalable. Most of your products are IT products. They are scalable. I happen to belong, for example, to the Clinton Global Initiative, which is launched by Bill Clinton, by putting networking people, those having the money, those having the ideas, very often with an idea of helping the world for a better world. I'm also an ambassador of Arnold Schwarzenegger with his green campaign. All those people need people like you. All those people, they have the resources, but they need talented, dedicated people to move around the world with willingness, intelligence, and independence.
Thank you. John, you mentioned that you were part of this panel which looked at the, all the entrepreneurs coming out of Latin America. What did you see there? What was the, again, are these people targeting global markets? Are they targeting the Latin America market? How are companies getting developed there?
So in Latin America, the basic model is not really true innovation. It's importing business models or technologies that exist outside and adapting them. They have a term which is Latinizing them, and they're hugely successful. I mean, there was one example of an entrepreneur in Chile who had a small farm and a technology for yellow flesh kiwis. This is an interesting story. Yellow flesh kiwis are only grown in a few locations around the world, China and Chile and a few others. And the Inter-American Development Bank came in and gave them loans and invested in them to bring new technology. They brought their technology at the agricultural level up to a world standard, best on the planet. They got a call one day from China. A guy said, I want to come and see you. He flew down. It turns out the Chinese, all of China, has a massive appetite for yellow flesh kiwi. But their systems for growing them are very, very primitive, 100 years old. So he said, could you please come to Beijing and show us and look at what we have and see if you could do something. He came. Now this guy spends 9 months a year in China and 3 months in Chile, and the Chinese have bought the entire company. They've become millionaires, and they're developing the China market. I mean, that's an example of how, hard work, at the ground level can really explode to some place around the planet that you didn't know. I think obviously it's been said throughout this whole conference here, Bangalore has got something unique and special that the rest of the world doesn't have, which is all of the IT skills that have been built up here, which has a whole history behind it, going back to the empire and defense industries and so forth here. I see, when we see the models that are coming into Kairen and we see what's going on here, this place has got the potential to become, an engine of the entire world.
With the Latin America?
Much higher level.
Here?
Much higher level here.
In terms of the technology that people were pursuing? Or?
Yeah. Over there it's more like grassroots. Here it's very high level. It's very, very sophisticated. People here are in touch. Running half of the multinational companies in the U.S. and people don't even know that. Yeah. Huge teams. Incredible.
So Dmitry, coming more closer to us, we've obviously had a very close relationship with Russia over the years. We've cooperated with Russia, for a long time. What is it that you're seeing in the Russian market right now? How does it resemble India? Is it a competitor? What's the situation right now in Russia?
Probably push it up.
Green?
So I think Russian market is very similar to India from from the little that I know of India. This is my first time. I'm actually here for it's my second day in India. So our VC industry is about 5 or 6 years old, but it's grown extremely fast. So I think we're up to about 8 or 10 billion in raised capital from literally 0 5 years ago. We have a lot of companies. Actually, most of the companies in Russia that are getting that money are companies just like in Latin America. They're copycats. So they look at what's been successful in the U.S. Russia is about 3-4 years behind, so they just adopt the business model. Try it out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, move on. There has been some Russian companies. So, for example, Yandex, it's a Russian search engine, which is public in the U.S., is an exact replica of Google. Because Russia has a different, Russians speak Russian, and because Google has focused on other markets, European markets, China, before it came to Russia, Google is like a really, really distant third or second in Russia. So we have a fairly close. If we talk about the consumer internet, we have a very closed market. But there have been companies, and we've seen more and more companies coming out of Russia with truly innovative solutions, and they target these solutions towards the global markets. They relocate to California. They have their development in Russia, and one thing I wanted to mention about which is what's cool about Russia is we have this immense scientific resource that's been left from the Soviet Union. Yeah. So we have these math guys who are now programmers. They do something magical with, especially in something that's algorithmic in nature. So a lot of big data, I think, is a very good growth area for Russia. And I think the one way for India and Russia to work together would be for if you have an Indian startup and it's you need great great programmers, you need great data scientists. Look at those. Look at the Russians. They are definitely cheaper than the U.S. So there's probably a factor of 2. But the skills you find in Russia are probably even better than in the U.S. There are a lot of Russians immigrating. There are a lot of Russians going outside, going to Silicon Valley. So there's definitely globalization trend, not just building companies, global companies, but also people leaving Russia and starting businesses in Silicon Valley, and then coming back to Russia for talent. So there are a few other structural things, like, for example, we don't have a very good legislation system yet. So Russia has been a capitalist economy only for the past 20 years. So, for example, as I mentioned to you before, we don't have so Russian companies cannot issue options to their employees. So that's one big structural challenge that we have. So what people do is they would.
So Indian companies can attract Russians by offering them options.
Well, yeah. So what Russians do is they incorporate in other jurisdictions.
Yeah.
They go for Cyprus, they go for Delaware, they go for BVI. The other interesting problem is that M&A in Russia is virtually inexistent. So all of these companies that are getting funded right now in Russia, they are basically it's a dividend play, right? So it's very tough to exit. Yandex and Mail.ru, all of these kind of large internet companies in Russia do not buy. They usually they tend to hire people in and build products within the companies.
I would say it's, if you talk to people here, they'll say very similar to India in terms of behavior.
So and the other side of M&A is that the Russian market, the Russian economy has monopolized over the past 10 years with Putin, in power, and he kind of built this government capitalism model, where these companies, they're not really interested in innovating. They're not under any competitive threats. They don't need to grow their valuations through acquisitions, so they don't
artificial
buy. And I don't know how it is in India, but I presume that because India has struggled with kind of the socialism,
Probably Russia does.
Yeah, I think it's much better, but Russia, unfortunately, Russia suffers from this. So the only way for a Russian company to exit would be an IPO in the Russian market. So the company that one of the companies that I work for, the Russian venture company, we've actually partnered up with a Russian exchange to build a technology sub-market exchange.
So let me just move on, coming back towards Europe and Eastern Europe, what has your experience been? Obviously, there's good technical talent there as well. What type of startups are getting funded, or what are investors looking for?
I think as Claude characterized the different markets, I think Switzerland or Europe is probably much more the kind of market where you have the big institutions, big, well-developed companies that are looking for invention because they need to grow, they need to show revenue increase, etc. So everybody's desperate to find something that really grows their model and their business. So in that respect, I think it's a very good climate because they are in desperate need of these ideas, and I think it depends a little bit on what kind of path that you're looking at in Europe, which industries or which ideas are really well thought after. So in Switzerland, it's probably more pharmaceuticals, probably more the financial innovation type thing, and probably in different countries in Europe, you have different types of clusters that are really looking for talent and ideas. I think Europe as such, if you're looking at the overall investor situation, I think it's become quite difficult from a regulatory perspective to distribute and to attract investors for VC funds and private equity, because regulation that has been introduced in Europe and Switzerland and other markets this year really make it much harder to distribute, even on qualified and sophisticated investors. So it's not as easy as just going out and market and attract investors. So as soon as you have something like 100 million assets under management, you need to get a license and register, and the complexity of all these regulations are just enormous. So I think another job for Claude to make sure that the regulatory framework is going to be a bit softer on that. But I think at the same time that really pushes some of that money, the capital that needs to be allocated, that pushes it into the sort of probably, let's say, less mature investors. So I think that because they're regulated bank capital to how India and the companies and the ideas out of India, how they can sort of demonstrate to Europe that India is not a volatile market, because with the quantitative easing and some of the more global economic issues, I think everybody's quite nervous about what happens in China and India. And I read an article about 3 weeks ago, as soon as these discussions in the US happen, everybody's like, what's India's, forex reserves, and what's going to happen with the rupees? Is it going to drop, and therefore all my investments are suddenly worthless? So I think that is a key element.
So even early stage investors are asking these type of questions that are more macroeconomic in nature.
Angels
are asking questions like macroeconomic.
Yeah, I mean that's an issue for them because especially in places like India, I mean the investments are made in at some point are translated into local currencies.
Right.
And
Yeah. That's so currency risk is a big issue.
It's probably less a US dollar run economy like probably in Ukraine or other places where deals are still made in US dollar. As far as I know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's my impression. So there are certain concerns around that, and so I think the more stable and the more India can demonstrate that this shouldn't be an issue, then I think there's a very flourishing angel investor community in Europe that is looking for capital allocation. So that's
there you go. I think anybody over here wants to approach the European investors, just talk to Marcel. So,
yes.
We have about 5 minutes. So, do people have questions from the panel? Otherwise, I'll ask a few more questions. Yeah, please go ahead. Can you just stand up? Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry for shouting.
Yeah.
I have a question about the India-Europe business corridor. If you look at the startup corridors going out of India, India and US, that corridor has been pretty well populated for a long time now. A lot of Indian entrepreneurs are looking east as well now with the growth of Singapore and so on. On the last panel, we had an entrepreneur who got incubated in Chile. Why is it, you think, that the India-Europe startup corridor has not really taken off? We've seen a few people investing in India. Are there certain entry barriers into the European market that Indian entrepreneurs are not able to target, etc.?
Yeah, I think Claude.
Good question.
I was one day at a dinner with the chairman of the Central European Bank, and he told me the major difference, or one of the major difference between the US and Europe is that the US, they practice selective Indian immigration policy. They brought all those brains of India to the Silicon Valley, and that made a difference. And Europe had not the intelligence to bring those. It's quite true. I think that language has helped, of course, but the fact that you had that flow of highly intelligent Indians, which took the control of the VCs in the Silicon Valley. I would say 3/4 of the VCs in the Silicon Valley are Indians, completely assimilated to America, but they are Indians. A lot of the financial services are Indians in the biotechnology, and without to speak about the software. So it has created a base of Indians being extremely at home in the US, and they came back to India. And now it's a back and forth, which is a natural movement between the two. I would claim that the US would not be where they have reached if they were not the Indian community. So it has been fundamental. And those, or part of those Indians, coming back to the homeland, that has helped, of course, now, that bridge. I believe that the success of the startup world is really based on two criteria. It's the combination of innovation and entrepreneurs. And it's not always the same people. Very often we may have the guy having the bright idea, but some of the inventors, they invent something and they look for the problem after. Whereas it's the opposite. What is the market need? How can I solve it? Plus, to be a successful entrepreneur, you need at least two characteristics. How do you address the risk? Some are going too crazy. Others, like the Swiss, it's the world capital of the insurances. They take zero risk, so they can't be entrepreneurs. Switzerland is always number 1 or number 2 in innovation, but they have very few startups. Because the aptitude to the risk, you can't teach the courage. So that's one element. The other element, which is fundamental, is leadership, team building, management. And very often, and that's very difficult, somebody who was the number 1 just after the invention has to accept that other people take the lead in the companies when the company grows. So I think Indians, because they are so resourceful, they have that flexibility to adapt to the various stages. You may have Indians up to the highest level of the large multinationals. as you have some people at the base of the pyramid. And I think that that flexibility of Indians to be at the various levels is one of the reasons why it has worked so well in the bridge between India and the US.
Okay, I think we're just running out of time. It says time is up. So I can take
Sandeep,
one more question, and then
Can I just take a quick shot at that? At one quick answer on that
Sure.
last question?
Yeah.
I agree with everything Claude said, but there's a huge Indian penetration, let's call it, integration in the UK, obviously for historical reasons as well as language. But Europe is not one country. Europe is many countries, and the language barrier is a huge thing. But there are lots of Indians everywhere in Europe, and they're very well accepted. They haven't made the kind of climb.
there are probably not as many entrepreneurial Indians in Europe as there are in the US. And
Well-
that's where the bridge is getting provided right now.
But Europe is not as entrepreneurial as the U.S.
In the first
itself
place,
is.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
not to do with
Yeah.
the Indians. It's
Yeah.
to do with Europe.
Yeah.
It's the problem there.
Chandra, one last question.
For the Russian gentleman, Dmitry, you made some interesting observations about the challenges in Russia and how innovation is stunted and Russian companies don't acquire within Russia. However, how would you contrast that with Russian investors like DST, who've just made phenomenal investments in Facebook and Groupon and Zynga, but they don't buy in Russia?
Right. So DST is a private equity fund, and they don't invest in Russia. I was actually part of the original Mail.ru team 15 years ago, and we sold this company during the first internet bubble. We sold this company to Yuri Milner. He bought it for $5 million because he had cash. Nobody else in the market had cash, and we were burning. I think we were burning like $250,000 a month. So he got it for cheap. He waited. He financed the company. He waited. He made it a great asset. He sold it to Naspers. He sold part of it to Naspers. He raised some money, and then he started investing globally. So he's done Facebook. He's done Zynga, Airbnb. He's done Twitter. He's done very well for He actually, in the U.S. there were a period of time where nobody placed. Nobody could do $300, $400 million checks into one company, and he actually innovated in that, in that model. So, unfortunately, Yuri doesn't really. He moved to California, so he's not in Russia anymore. So all of his investments are in the U.S. He has a few assets in Russia, like Mail.ru. There's a social network called Vkontakte, vk.com. But that's pretty much it. So he kind of moved out of Russia, aside from these assets.
Well, I want to thank the panel for a great discussion. I hope you guys found it interesting. I didn't hear any snoring, so I guess that worked. Thank you very much for a great audience, and best of luck with the rest of your NASSCOM sessions. Thanks.